I figured that the next logical step after making a prediction video for Season 10 would be a list of my top 10 most wanted matchups. But I decided not to be boring. Yes, I'm really doing this. A 10-part series going over my 100 most wanted death battle matchups. I've tried to order them as best as I could, but for a lot of these, especially in the bottom 2/3, they're interchangeable with around 5 either side of them. Of course, when we get to the top 25 or so, that's when the order really matters. For the sake of laziness, I'm gonna put detailed connections for all 100 matchups in the pinned comment, rather than editing a screenshot on screen, just to save me some time. I'll give a brief summary if necessary, but going over every single little detail will not make this video fun. So, let's begin the countdown. You know what would be a clear cash cow for Rooster Teeth? More Kung Fu Panda episodes. Poe vs Iron Fist was a massive success viewership-wise, and the Kung Fu Panda franchise is only getting more fans every day. I'll be honest and say I don't particularly care for either character here, but Kung Lao vs Crane would make for a really cool matchup. Two Kung Fu Razor Hat wielders whose confidence define their character. Mortal Kombat and Kung Fu Panda have helped define my life for the better, so expect a fair share of both franchises on this ranking. These aren't characters that get a lot of focus, so I think a death battle would be the perfect way to do so. It could start as a friendly spar, perhaps Lao thinking he's the one who should be the Dragon Warrior, only for Crane to intercept him on his way to the Jade Palace. In terms of animation style, it could work in sprites or 3D, whichever seems appropriate. The only issue here is the death, because assuming Lao wins, seeing a fatality on Crane just does not feel right, although I'm sure they could find a workaround. Regardless, if fast-paced martial arts matchups are your thing, I'd definitely give this matchup a closer look. I swear this one isn't just for memes. Grog Crude vs Hotel Transylvania Dracula is unironically a really fun matchup. A battle between two animated dads whose sole goal in life is to protect their families from anything new, as they are the last of their kind, but eventually learn to allow themselves to experience new things thanks to an innovative human falling in love with their daughters. I grew up with the first Hotel Transylvania film, having fond memories of seeing it with my friends back in primary school, and still think that 1 and 2 are okay films even today. I still haven't seen 3 and 4, but from what I'm hearing, I'm not missing out on much. The Croods 1 and 2 are both solid movies as well, and Grog is just, well, it's Grog. Come on! I've heard this is a close debate as well, although Grog probably loses due to Drax's hacks. I feel like hand-drawn might be the best option for this matchup, although I have no real preference here, as long as it's fun and doesn't take itself too seriously. Hell, the setup is right there with Grog showing up at the hotel one day and Drac wanting him out. Hell, now that I mention it, the hotel itself offers a bunch of wacky set pieces to pull from, with Drac's smarts contrasting with Grog's stupidity. I'm almost talking myself into putting this one higher, but for now I'm sticking with the number 99 spot. Recently I've seen a lot of people request that the Joker get a second episode. I personally still have a lot of nostalgia for Joker vs Needles, but I can see why some people have issues with it, regardless of how good I still think it is. So, who's his best option for a return? Green Goblin. Yeah, I know, it's Marvel vs DC, but it's one of the few I think would be worth putting into production. Batman vs Spider-Man as a rivalry has been done to death, but it clearly gets views, so this one wouldn't be an exception. Hell, I'm shocked we haven't gotten this one yet, with them both being the main villains of both heroes, and both have decades worth of crazy gadgets to choose from, which I'm not going to make a list of, but trust me when I say this could be one of the most enjoyable comic book matchups we've ever had. Unfortunately, it's pretty clear that Norman takes it via stats, but I don't let the debate sway me away from a banger animation potential. I've seen some people treat this as a let's get it out of the way matchup, so I hope people start to realise how fun this could actually be. Ever since Brandon and Werewolf began taking commissions, there's been a few matchups that have caught my eye, either for being super thematic, having insane animation potential, or just being straight up weird. And speaking of weird, I'm a big fan of Ansem vs the Biolizard. Like I said, weirdo matchup. This really isn't a connection-based matchup, nor is it particularly fair for the Biolizard. Rather, it's one where an animation between the two would be so sick to watch. I don't have too much to say other than please listen to Live in Darkness by Brandon. That was such a weird sentence to say. It is such a banger, and I really like Kingdom Hearts 1 and the Sonic Adventure games, so I can only pray even a cast of this one happens, since I don't think this will ever become a real episode. But one can only dream. Recently, Morrow, one of, if not the main hand-drawn and shot animator for the show, stated that they were doing a solo project during Season 11. This is what I'm hoping it is. Fall Guys vs Among Us. I think this would be perfect for a hand-drawn episode. Plus, as mentioned in the previous video, I think this will happen during Season 11. This matchup became popular after a fan-made preview was made for it and shown on the cast. Hence why it was placed in the 2022 2D ballot. I never had the friends to play either game at their peaks, unfortunately, so I can't place it any higher than this, but I am well aware of how memeable and fun this matchup is, and the fact that Among Us unironically wins is just so funny. One thing I fell in love with at the start of 2022 was Gurren Lagann, so naturally there were a matchup or two that came under my radar as something I'd want. We'll get to the obvious one a bit later, don't worry, but for now, may I present to you Khiton vs Yamcha, the battle of desert vigilantes who learn to harness their own life force to battle an animalistic race. Both also have super iconic deaths, but for opposite reasons. Yamcha's for the memes and Khiton's for the hype. Again, see the pinned comment because I skipped a bunch of information here. I really like Khiton, and he's probably my favourite character from the show. I don't care for Yamcha all that much, I'll admit, but I'd like to see how he's handling the versus debate whilst actually treating him with a bit of respect. Unfortunately, from what I've been told, this is a stomp for Khiton, and the size difference does make this a bit tricky to decipher how a fight between the two would even work, but regardless, I'd love to see even just a cast episode of this, because this is just a super fun matchup involving characters that are often overshadowed by the main protagonist of their respective mangas. But let's get Kyle vs Simone out the way first. Overwatch vs TF2 is a classic rivalry. We've had Tracer vs Scout, and since then, Overwatch has only returned once, and TF2 hasn't even returned at all. Despite the issues both franchises and communities have, the characters and worlds should always be taken as separate to them, since both sets of characters are some of the most colourful in all of gaming. I have a couple involving both versus other franchises, but for now I have only one TF2 vs Overwatch matchup I'd really like to see. Heavy vs Zarya. Yep, this is the only TF2 vs Overwatch matchup I think should happen. What's not to love here? Heavy is pretty much the poster boy for TF2, so he should be prioritised for a death battle over the other mercs. Zarya, whilst really fun in modern day Overwatch, isn't the most popular hero among general audiences. That being said, I still love this matchup. Both are patriotic to the core, and offer a ton of fun interactions. Hell, you could have the fight start with Zarya touching Heavy's gun, him getting pissed, and them starting an arm wrestling contest that goes south. It practically writes itself. The only issue is how the fan bases will react to it, but I have faith that the potential of the animation will help dissipate any potential controversy. Genshin Impact is a franchise, like League of Legends, that feels inevitable for an episode within the next year or two. I don't particularly care for Byleth vs the Traveler or Illidan vs Zhao, as cool as both of those would be. My preferred matchup would of course be Lord Raiden vs Raiden Shogun. If I mispronounce anything here, I'm sorry, I don't play Genshin. Both are well-meaning thunder gods inspired by the same mythology, who turn from well-meaning to paranoid and broken after losing their loved ones, before undergoing a change that allows them to make up for their wrongdoings. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's the general idea. Again, see the pinned comment. Since both are resistant to lightning, this can make for a very interesting battle where both have to rely on weapons and martial arts. I've seen it be suggested that since the Shogun has no bones, Raiden could go for an X-ray only to realize there is something wrong. He figures out the truth and the real battle finally begins, with Raiden teleporting into A's dimension, realizing the sadness within each other before the killing blow is landed. This is such a banger of an idea, I just wished I had any shred of care towards Genshin. Time for another popular cartoon request, and this time we have one that I've seen the crew dismiss again and again, much to mine and many disappointment. Perry vs Skipper. Despite this being a pretty clear sweep for Perry, it's hard to deny how fun this matchup is. I grew up with the Madagascar trilogy being a huge part of my childhood, bringing me many fond memories with my family and friends, so I'm naturally biased towards picking Skipper for Perry, which is his most popular, thank god. I also watch my fair share of Phineas and Ferb, and whilst I don't love it, I can see why so many do. This matchup is basically just Bond vs Wick, but with cartoon physics, and I am here for it. They've used Perry a couple times now on the cast, but they keep avoiding Skipper for some reason. Hopefully one day we'll get this, but I'm losing hope. The day I'm writing this, I have just finished watching Netflix's live-action Avatar show, and I thought it was quite good. Hell, I almost enjoyed it more than the original season 1. One character I was shocked I enjoyed as much as I did was the Fire Lord himself, Ozai. I think you know where I'm going with this. Ozai versus Endeavor. Yeah, this is basically just Zuko versus Todoroki 2.0, but after the mediocre reception to that episode, I think this would be the perfect way to redeem both the crappy writing and the crappy animation, let's be honest. Honestly, so long as the effects are as good as they were back in Zuko vs Todoroki, this episode could easily be a season highlight. Not to mention, now that Endeavor has gone through his redemption arc, this offers a neat contrast between the two. I am aware that this is a bit of a controversial matchup, but who else are these two gonna fight? Plus, seeing how well Sauron was handled, I think the issue of, oh, but Ozai is more of a presence than a fighter, is really not valid. And there's part 1 done. I know I didn't have too much to say on each of these, but there's 100 different matchups here. I'm not going to go into detail on all of them, but expect the level of detail to change as I progress through this series. Now, go request the epic Grug vs Dracula, and of course, be excellent to each other.